There is a moment, a single, intimate, silent moment, when life ceases to be explainable by the old narratives. It is not a moment made of explosions, plot twists, great events. It is not a dramatic collapse, not a sweeping victory. It is an internal shift, so discreet that no one around perceives it, but whoever feels it knows. From that point on, the game changes. It is the instant when you see, and after you see, there is no way to unsee. Until that moment, you can tell stories. You can say you were dragged by circumstances, that you didn't know enough, that it was too early, that it was too late, that someone should have done more for you, that something should have been different. And all these stories make sense until the day they don't anymore. Because there comes a moment when they simply cannot sustain the weight of what you know. You keep trying to repeat them, but your own mouth refuses the lie. Your body stiffens. Your mind goes silent. The internal silence denounces, you saw, you understood, you perceived. And now any sentence you use to avoid your responsibility sounds like an old echo, an echo that no longer deceives. This discomfort is so intense that most people spend their lives fighting to never reach it. Because while you don't know, there exists a kind of emotional immunity, a functional innocence, a tacit permission to blame what came before, what is outside, what seems greater. But when you know, when you really know, when you recognize without poetic intention, without drama, without spiritualization, the weight changes location, and no one prepares you for this. Adult life does not begin when you pay bills. It does not begin at your first job. It does not begin when you live alone. Adult life begins when consciousness makes a demand you couldn't hear before. Take responsibility. And taking responsibility is not beautiful. Taking responsibility is not light. Taking responsibility is not inspiring. Taking responsibility hurts. It hurts because it tears you from fantasy. It hurts because it pulls you from psychological childhood. It hurts because it destroys the comfortable position of innocence. It hurts because it reveals, without gentleness, how much you have sabotaged yourself. This is where the first great truth enters that no one admits. Before taking responsibility, people prefer to believe they are lost. Because being lost is more comfortable than being conscious and immobilized. He knew this. He said that what we avoid facing becomes the invisible track that leads us exactly to what we say we fear. Not because destiny is cruel, but because the psyche repeatedly tries to place the person before what they insist on denying. Denial is comfortable, but it has an enormous existential cost. And that cost usually comes disguised as, it is not the right time. I am not ready. I need to resolve other things first. And one day I will. I am still understanding. All these thoughts sound rational, until the day they sound dysfunctional. And that day comes. It always comes. It is the day when the internal voice, the one you silenced for years, rises and says, you know exactly what you are doing. You know exactly what you are avoiding. You know exactly the price of continuing this way. It is this moment that ignites the fire. And after it ignites, there is no possible return. Here is an old reminder. The flame does not come to illuminate. It comes to reveal. And what it reveals is almost always too harsh to be romanticized. He knew this when he observed men trembling in the darkness. He saw fragile creatures, vulnerable, governed by lack of consciousness, and he decided to do something no one dared to do. Not out of heroism, not out of rebellion, not out of pure kindness, but out of vision. He knew what it meant to give fire to humans. It was not help, it was rupture. Because after the flame, there is no longer the possibility of returning to full unconsciousness. After the flame, there is no longer the excuse of ignorance. After the flame, there is no longer the comfort of depending on something external. And that is why the myth endures. Because fire is not just light, it is responsibility. And he knew that delivering responsibility is delivering weight. In the internal world, this fire is the moment when you understand. Understand for real. Understand that it is no longer possible to hide behind confusion. Understand that it is no longer honest to say you are lost. Understand that deep down, you know what you need to do and don't do. You know what you need to release and don't release. You know what you need to assume and don't assume. You know what you need to break and don't break. You know what you need to begin and don't begin. And this consciousness hurts more than any punishment. That is why so many people prefer not to awaken. They prefer to keep justifying. They prefer to keep narrating their own pain as if they were spectators of it and not authors. They prefer to keep protecting themselves from the discomfort of action with the discourse of, "I am not ready." This discourse works until it doesn't. Because there comes a moment when suffering is no longer caused by the world, it is caused by your own escape. And this is the sharpest suffering of all. He called this confrontation illuminating the shadow, that part that sees and retreats. Not to wrap the concept in mysticism, but because the shadow is precisely that part that knows and avoids, that part that understands and negotiates, that part that repeats and calls it destiny. The shadow is not evil. The shadow is postponement. The shadow is self-censorship. The shadow is self-protection. The shadow is repeated hesitation. And when you awaken, it becomes illuminated. And what is illuminated begins to demand an answer. This is where many confuse responsibility with guilt. But responsibility is not guilt. Guilt paralyzes. Responsibility moves. Guilt destroys. Responsibility reorganizes. Guilt focuses on the past. Responsibility focuses on the present and on what can still be born. He does not sit on the rock saying, "I regret." He does not try to return the fire. He does not try to explain his decision. He sustains. And sustaining is precisely what differentiates maturity from self-pity. This is the point where most retreat, because sustaining hurts. Sustaining requires that you stop mixing with discourses that before seemed so familiar. Sustaining requires that you abandon the comfort of complaining. Sustaining requires that you stop saying "one day." Here many try to go back. They try to convince themselves that it is not quite like that. They try to cling to micro-justifications that before seemed enormous. They try to diminish their own vision to fit back into the old mold. But the fire does not go back, and neither do you. Once you know, you cannot relate to your own life as if you did not know. And this is the true weight of consciousness. It continues to burn until you move. This is why anguish grows when you understand but do not act. Because the interval between knowing and sustaining is the most dangerous of all. It is there that you feel a silent irritation, a restlessness that does not pass, an exhaustion that does not come from the body. It is there that you feel trapped, but not by circumstances, by avoided choices. This is the modern prison, the prison made of postponements, the prison made of almost decisions, the prison made of half movements, the prison made of knowing and not sustaining. And this hurts more than anything external, because it is pain with lucidity, pain with consciousness, pain with a name. It is the liver that regenerates. The punishment was never the pain, it was the memory. He remembers, he knows, he understands, and even so, he remains bound to the price of his own choice. Consciousness works exactly like this. It does not destroy you, it forces you to process. Every day, until you become someone capable of carrying your own fire without burning yourself. And that takes time. It takes confrontation. It takes truth. It takes quiet courage, not heroic. Life does not expect you to be a hero. It expects you to be honest. Honest enough to admit that what you avoid is exactly what is keeping you bound. This has no glamour. It has no catchy phrase. It has no golden light behind it. It is hard, raw, intimate, and absolutely liberating. Because when you finally take responsibility, it is not the world that changes. It is you. It is the internal weight that changes location. It is the direction that emerges. It is the clarity that appears after the decision, never before. It is the silent fit between who you are and who you know you need to be. From that point on, the next movement is not giant. It is not heroic. It is not epic. The next movement is simple. Stop running. Stop delaying. Stop negotiating. Stop narrating. Stop hiding behind one day. Consciousness is the beginning, but action is the cure. If something within you recognized this truth, if some part of you saw itself here, do not distance yourself. Write in the comments now what you have been avoiding taking responsibility for. Not for exposure, but as an internal mark. The fire only stays lit when you decide not to run from it. There is a point in the journey where the problem is no longer not knowing. The problem is knowing and still remaining. Because there is a brutal difference between ignorance and stagnant consciousness. Ignorance hurts less. Ignorance offers comfort zones. Ignorance allows external blame. Ignorance offers emotional alibis. But consciousness offers none of that. It offers only one choice: sustain or lie to yourself. And it is exactly here that human experience becomes complicated. Because taking responsibility before acting creates an internal tension that corrodes. It does not destroy the body. It destroys coherence. It is the same dynamic that echoes in the myth that crossed generations. His liver regenerates. The pain returns. And he knows exactly why. Most think this repetition is cruel. But if you look with the right eyes, you will see it is symbolic. The organ that hurts is precisely what transforms, what arrives, what metabolizes, what processes, what digests. His pain is the pain of someone who knows and can no longer return to before. And modern human suffering is not so different. It is born from the same root the person knows, but still does not sustain. He said that consciousness first expands suffering, only then liberates. And this explains so much that no one talks about. It explains why, when someone awakens, it seems everything gets worse before it improves. Why anguish increases. Why irritation grows. Why discomfort intensifies. It is not regression. It is the price of vision. Before, you walked in the dark. And stumbling in the dark is hard, but understandable. After the light turns on, stumbling becomes choice. And you feel that weight. You feel it in your shoulders, in your mind, in your chest. It's a pressure you cannot explain to anyone, because no one sees, only you feel. This is how what people erroneously call deep crisis begins. But it is not crisis. It is beginning. It is the start of a process that most abandon because it hurts exactly where it needs to hurt. It is the pain of seeing yourself without justification. It is the pain of realizing that you just don't want to pay the price. It is the pain of admitting that life does not move, not because of external obstacles, but because of internal pacts with your own avoidance. And this pact is silent. It is sophisticated. It is intelligent. It is convincing. This is why escape is so hard to see. The person thinks they are reflecting, but they are procrastinating. They think they are preparing, but they are delaying. They think they are being prudent, but they are self-sabotaging. They think they are waiting for clarity, but they are avoiding the discomfort of action. And this is only seen when the light has already burned too bright to allow shadow. From that point on, life demands another kind of posture. It does not demand perfection. It does not demand genius. It does not demand absolute courage. It demands only presence. And presence is rare. Presence is looking in the eyes of your own repetition. Presence is admitting what you already know. Presence is confessing what you do to yourself without being forced. Presence is stopping negotiations with your own consciousness. And perhaps this is the most uncomfortable part. Before changing, the person tries to adjust the discourse, changes the narratives, changes the justifications. changes the promises, changes the deadlines, changes the words they use to convince themselves, but does not change themselves. And it is exactly this that generates suffering. Life does not hurt because it is wrong. It hurts because you are trying to live with incompatible versions of yourself, one that awakens and another that runs. This internal friction is what tears, and what tears only stops tearing when you decide to stop dividing yourself. But taking responsibility means losing something precious to the ego, the right to place blame on anything else. And this frightens because it leaves you alone before your own reflection. The solitude of consciousness is the true rock. It is not stone. It is lucidity. And no one wants to be bound to lucidity. It is too uncomfortable. It demands too much. It illuminates too much. It reveals too much. But it also liberates too much. Liberates from internal lies. Liberates from the fantasy of rescue. Liberates from emotional naivety. Liberates from the idea that life needs to be perfect to begin. Liberates from the endless waiting for the right moment. And in the end, liberates you from yourself, from the version that only survived but did not live. There is a particularly cruel part of this process that is almost never described. The phase when you know you cannot stand what you live, but still do not know how to get out. It is the psychological purgatory, the interval between vision and movement, between clarity and action, between consciousness and courage. This phase feels like despair, but it is part of the structure. It is the moment when you realize that no advice resolves. No inspiring phrase works. No external help replaces what needs to be born from within. It is when you feel for the first time that you are beginning to become an author, even if you have not yet written a different line. This is the point where many quit, not because they are weak, but because they are waiting for the transition to be beautiful. And it never is. Transformation is loss. It is goodbye. It is rupture. It is symbolic death. It is mourning the old version. It is mourning the comfort that never returns. It is mourning innocence. And at the same time, it is birth. Births are disorganized, dirty, intense, painful, uncontrollable. You do not want clarity. You want someone to tell you what to do. But they are births. The process demands respect, and it demands a quiet courage that does not appear on social media. The courage that does not want applause, that does not want witness, that does not want validation. The courage that is taken at 3 in the morning, when no one is looking, when you realize that either you change, or you spend the rest of your life explaining why you did not. Adult life begins exactly at this instant, when you realize that everything you expect from others is, in fact, what you need to do for yourself. You do not want decision. You want an exit without consequences. You do not want courage. You want a guarantee that it will not hurt. You do not want change. You want transformation without loss. But none of this exists. Only risk exists. Only renunciation exists. Only responsibility exists. Only fire exists. He knew. He knew before. He knew during. He knew after. And he did not retreat. Because there is no way to retreat after you see and you saw. This is why you are reading this now. Not by chance, not by coincidence, but because something has already been burning inside for a long time. Or if you will finally sustain what consciousness demands. The truth is simple. You always knew. And you are tired of knowing without acting. And deep down, you know that you do not need another explanation. You need decision. And decision is not heroic. It is intimate, quiet, raw, painful, and absolutely transformative. Decision is the thread that separates repetition from rupture. It is the thread that separates postponement from movement. It is the thread that separates innocence from maturity. It is the thread that separates you from yourself. And when you cut that thread, something is born. Something that does not need to be perfect. Something that does not need to be beautiful. Something that does not need to be big. Something that does not need to be immediate. It only needs to be true. Because from truth, everything moves, and from escape, everything repeats. If you recognized yourself here, if something tightened where you most avoid touching, do not distance yourself. Right now, what you have been postponing, taking responsibility for, not for engagement, but as your first concrete act of someone who decided to stop running.